The wine glass hit the marble floor hard, breaking into tiny pieces that scattered everywhere like dangerous glitter. Yuna's perfectly done nails were still pointing down at the shaking server who had bumped into her expensive dress by mistake. "Clean it up," Yuna said in a voice as cold as winter, cutting through all the rich people talking in the big fancy room. "And then leave. You're fired." The young woman fell to her knees, trying to pick up the glass pieces with her trembling hands. Blood started to show where the sharp edges cut her skin. Nobody moved to help her. Nobody would dare. They all knew not to get in Yuna Park's way when she was mad. She was going to marry Jun Kwan, the most dangerous crime boss in South Korea, and she used that power like a weapon against anyone who crossed her. Before we begin, write your name and where in the world you are watching from in the comments below. Yuna, darling. Ji-hun's deep voice broke through the tension as he walked over. His expensive black suit fit his tall, strong body perfectly. His good-looking face showed nothing, but his dark eyes held a clear warning. "You're causing trouble at our engagement party." Yuna's angry look instantly changed into a sweet smile, though her eyes stayed ice-cold. "I was just dealing with bad work, my love. I'm sure you understand why we need to keep our standards high." From the kitchen door, hiding in the shadows, Petra watched everything happen, with her heart beating fast. She had come to Seoul just 3 days ago, desperate for any job after losing her teaching position back in Lagos. The work agency had promised her good money working as a house cleaner for a rich Korean family. They forgot to mention that this family ran a criminal empire. "Remember why you're here," Petra whispered to herself, touching the small cross necklace around her neck. She needed this job badly. Her mother's hospital bills wouldn't pay themselves, and her brothers and sisters back home counted on the money she sent every month. Mrs. Cho, the head housekeeper, appeared next to her. The older Korean woman's face was serious. "You start tomorrow at 5 in the morning. Sharp. And listen carefully, girl. Keep your head down. Do your work and stay out of sight. Especially around Miss Yuna." Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "And whatever you do, don't look at Master Jun. That woman has killed people for less." Petra nodded, her throat feeling tight. "Yes, ma'am." But fate, it seemed, had different plans. The next morning came too fast. Petra's alarm buzzed at 4:30, jolting her from restless sleep. Her small room in the servants' quarters felt cold in the pre-dawn darkness. She dressed quickly in the black uniform Mrs. Cho had given her, pulling her hair back into a neat bun. Her hands shook slightly as she pinned the white collar in place. The kitchen was already bustling when she arrived. Steam rose from pots of rice, and the sharp scent of kimchi filled the air. Mrs. Cho stood at the center, directing the other staff with military precision. "Petra," Mrs. Cho called without looking up, "you'll take Master Ji-hun's breakfast to his study. Don't speak unless spoken to. Set the tray down and leave immediately." Petra's stomach dropped. She had hoped for a few more days before encountering the master of the house. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Cho handed her a heavy silver tray. Steam rose from a bowl of soup, and a cup of coffee sat perfectly centered next to traditional side dishes. The porcelain was so fine Petra could see through it. His study is on the 3rd floor, East Wing, the double doors, with the dragon carvings. Mrs. Cho's eyes narrowed. "Remember what I told you yesterday." The walk through the mansion felt endless. Petra's footsteps echoed on marble floors as she climbed the grand staircase. Expensive paintings lined the walls, and fresh flowers sat in crystal vases on every table. Everything screamed wealth and power. She found the doors Mrs. Cho had described. The dragon carvings were intricate, their eyes seeming to follow her movement. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. "Come in." A deep voice responded from inside. Petra pushed the heavy door open with her shoulder, balancing the tray carefully. The study was massive, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk that could have seated 6 people. Morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden squares across the dark wood floor. Ji-hun Kwan sat behind the desk, reading what looked like financial reports. He was younger than she had expected, maybe in his early 30s. His black hair was perfectly styled, and he wore an expensive dark suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They were sharp and intelligent. But there was something else there, something that looked almost lonely. When he looked up at her, time seemed to stop. Those dark eyes met hers across the room, and Petra felt something electric shoot through her chest. Her step faltered, and the coffee cup rattled against its saucer. The hot liquid sloshed dangerously close to the rim. "Careful," Ji-hun said, rising from his chair in one fluid movement. The tray tilted in her hands. The coffee cup slid toward the edge, scalding liquid beginning to spill. Petra lunged forward, trying to steady the tray, but her uniform shoes slipped on the polished floor. Strong hands caught the tray just before everything crashed to the ground. Ji-hun stood inches from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and clean that made her head spin. His fingers brushed hers as he steadied the silver tray, and the touch sent heat racing up her arms. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. His voice was deeper up close, with just a trace of an accent. Petra stared up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was even more handsome this close. A thin scar ran along his left temple, and she could see the edge of a tattoo peeking above his collar. But it was the way he looked at her that made her forget how to breathe. Like he was seeing her. Really seeing her. "No, sir. I'm fine," she managed to whisper. He didn't step back. If anything, he seemed to lean slightly closer. "You're new?" It wasn't a question. Petra nodded anyway, not trusting her voice. "What's your name?" "Petra." "Petra Akungwo, sir." "Petra," he repeated, like he was tasting the word. "That's not Korean." "I'm from Nigeria, sir." The words came out breathless. Something shifted in his expression. Interest, maybe, or curiosity. Nigeria. That's a long way from Seoul. Before Petra could respond, the study doors burst open behind them. "Ji-hun, darling, I thought we could have breakfast together before—" Yuna Park's voice cut off sharply. Petra spun around, her face burning with embarrassment. Yuna stood in the doorway, elegant in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Petra made in a year. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the flash of rage in her eyes as she took in the scene. Ji-hun and Petra standing close together, his hands still on the breakfast tray, the obvious tension crackling between them. "I see you're already busy," Yuna said, each word sharp as a knife. Ji-hun stepped back smoothly, but his eyes never left Petra's face. "Miss Park, this is Petra. She's new to the household staff." Yuna's smile was poisonous sweet. "How lovely. Another charity case from Mrs. Cho, I assume?" Her gaze raked over Petra from head to toe, taking in every detail with obvious disdain. "Tell me, little African girl, what brought you to Korea? Looking for a rich husband?" "Yuna." Ji-hun's voice carried a warning. Petra straightened her spine, calling on every bit of dignity she possessed. "I'm here to work, miss. Nothing more." "Of course you are." Yuna moved into the room like a predator circling prey. "And what exactly did you do back in— where was it? Nigeria?" "I was a language teacher," Petra said quietly. "A teacher?" Ji-hoon's eyebrows rose. "What languages?" "English, French, and Yoruba. I was working on my Korean before I came here." Something warm flickered in Ji-hoon's eyes. "Impressive. What made you leave teaching?" The question hit like a physical blow. Petra's throat tightened as she thought of her mother's diagnosis, the medical bills that had crushed their family's small savings, the school that couldn't afford to keep her when enrollment dropped. "Family circumstances, sir. My mother. She's sick." Ji-hoon's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." The genuine sympathy in his voice almost undid her. When was the last time someone had spoken to her with such kindness? Not since she'd left Lagos, certainly. Here in Seoul, she was invisible at best, a nuisance at worst. "Well," Yuna interrupted, her voice like ice cracking. "How tragic. But I'm sure there are plenty of other opportunities for someone with your skills. Perhaps it would be best if you explored them. Seoul can be such a dangerous place for foreigners who don't understand their place." The threat was clear as daylight. Petra felt her stomach drop, but before she could respond, Ji-hoon spoke. "Petra will stay as long as she wishes," he said, his tone final. "She's under the protection of this house now." Yuna's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. "Of course, darling. How generous of you." An awkward silence stretched between them. Petra realized she was still standing there like an idiot, holding the breakfast tray while these two powerful people discussed her fate like she wasn't in the room. "I should. Should I serve your breakfast now, sir?" she asked quietly. Ji-hoon nodded, but his attention remained focused on her in a way that made her skin tingle. "Please." Petra moved to the desk on unsteady legs, setting out the dishes with careful precision. She could feel both sets of eyes watching her every movement. Ji-hoon's gaze felt warm, curious. Yuna's felt like knives between her shoulder blades. "You mentioned your mother is ill," Ji-hoon said as she arranged the silverware. "What's wrong with her?" Petra's hands stilled. She shouldn't be having this conversation. Mrs. Cho had been clear about keeping her head down and staying invisible. But something about Ji-hoon's tone made her want to answer honestly. "Cancer, sir. Breast cancer. The treatments are expensive." "And you're supporting her alone?" "I have younger siblings, brothers and sisters still in school." Petra's voice grew smaller with each word. "I send most of what I earn home." When she glanced up, she found Ji-hoon watching her with something that looked almost like admiration. "You're very brave." The simple words hit her harder than any grand gesture could have. Petra blinked rapidly, fighting back sudden tears. No one had called her brave. Desperate, maybe. Stupid for coming to a foreign country with no connections and barely any money, but never brave. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "Perhaps," Yuna said, her voice cutting through the moment like a blade. "We could discuss the staff situation later, darling. I believe Petra has work to do." It was a clear dismissal. Petra gathered the empty tray and moved toward the door, but Ji-hoon's voice stopped her. "Petra." She turned back, her heart racing again. "What's your mother's name?" "Mrs. Akono, sir. Margaret Akono." He nodded slowly. "And which hospital is treating her?" Petra's confusion must have shown on her face because he added gently, "In Lagos. University College Hospital, sir. But I don't understand." "I'd like to help with her medical bills," he said simply. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Petra stared at him, certain she had misheard. Sir? Consider it an advance on your salary, or a signing bonus, if you prefer. Yuna's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. Ji-hun, surely. The decision is made, he said without looking at his fiancée. His eyes remained locked on Petra's face. I'll have my assistant contact the hospital today. Your mother will receive the best possible care. Petra's knees nearly buckled. The crushing weight she had carried for months, the constant terror that her mother would die because they couldn't afford treatment, suddenly lifted. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back sobs. I don't know how to thank you, sir. No thanks necessary. Ji-hun's voice was soft, almost gentle. Family should be protected. The way he said it made Petra think he understood something about sacrifice, about carrying the weight of other people's lives on your shoulders. She wanted to ask what he meant, but Yuna cleared her throat pointedly. How wonderful, Yuna said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but wonderful. Such charity. I'm sure Petra will be very grateful. There was something nasty in the way she emphasized that last word, something that made Petra's cheeks burn with shame and anger. But before she could respond, Ji-hun spoke again. That will be all for now, Petra. Thank you for breakfast. She managed a shaky bow and fled the study, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it through the walls. As she hurried down the hallway, she caught fragments of heated conversation behind the closed doors. Completely inappropriate. My decision to make. That little gold digger. The words faded as she put distance between herself and the study, but their implications followed her like shadows. She had made an enemy of the most powerful woman in the house. Worse, she had felt something when Ji-hun looked at her, something dangerous and impossible and completely forbidden. But her mother would live. That was all that mattered. Whatever price she had to pay for that gift, she would find a way to pay it, even if it meant walking through fire. The next morning brought a summons that changed everything. Mrs. Cho found Petra in the laundry room, her weathered hands gripping a clipboard with unusual tension. Mr. Kwan has requested you as his personal attendant, she announced, her voice carefully neutral. Starting immediately. The other maids stopped their work, exchanging glances heavy with meaning. Sujane stepped closer, her young face creased with worry. Personal attendant? Petra's voice came out smaller than she intended. You'll manage his schedule, serve his meals, maintain his study and private quarters. It's a position of trust. Mrs. Cho's eyes searched Petra's face. And visibility. Are you certain you're prepared for that? The warning lay beneath her words like ice under thin snow. Petra thought of her mother's medical bills, already paid, and the responsibility that came with that gift. Yes, ma'am. Then report to his study at 8. Sujin will show you the protocols. Tai-dai-di. The walk through the mansion's corridors felt different now. Petra was no longer invisible, no longer just another face among the staff. Guards nodded at her with newfound recognition. Other servants stepped aside with a respect that felt more like fear. He never does this, Sujane whispered as they climbed the marble staircase. Personal attendants are chosen from families who've served for generations, not newcomers. Maybe he needs someone who speaks English well. Sujane's look was pointed. Maybe. Or maybe Miss Yuna was right to be worried. Ji-hun's study occupied the mansion's east wing, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Seoul's sprawling cityscape. When Petra knocked, his voice called her in with the same measured tone from yesterday. He stood behind his desk, reviewing documents that looked official and dangerous. Today he wore a simple black shirt that emphasized the tattoos creeping up his forearms. dragon scales and Korean script wound around scars that told stories she didn't want to imagine. "Good morning, Petra." He looked up, and again that spark of connection passed between them. "Mrs. Cho explained your new duties?" "Yes, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity." "Don't be grateful yet. This position puts you in the center of my world. That's not always a safe place to be." She thought of Yuna's cold fury, of the way power moved through this house like a living thing. "I understand." "Do you?" He stepped around the desk, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. "My fiancé has already marked you as a threat. My enemies will see any closeness to me as weakness to exploit. The very reason I chose you, your independence, your strength, is what will make this dangerous." "Why did you choose me?" The question hung in the air between them. Ji-hun's dark eyes studied her face, as if memorizing every detail. "Because when you looked at me yesterday, you saw a man. Not a title, not power, not fear, just a man. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me that way." Heat bloomed in her chest, dangerous and unwelcome. "Mr. Kwan." "Ji-hun, if you're going to work closely with me, use my name." Ji-hun. His name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate, too personal. "I need you to know that I'm grateful for what you've done for my family, but I won't compromise my principles, even for this position." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I wouldn't expect you to. Your principles are part of what makes you valuable." "Valuable for what?" "For reminding me that I'm still human." The words settled between them with weight that made breathing difficult. Petra stepped back, needing distance from whatever was building in this room. "Your breakfast," she said, focusing on safer ground. "What would you prefer?" "Whatever Mrs. Cho usually sends is fine, but I'd like you to eat with me." "That's not appropriate." "Nothing about this situation is appropriate." His voice carried an edge of dark humor. "Humor me." The breakfast arrived within minutes, carried by 2 junior staff who wouldn't meet Petra's eyes. As she arranged the dishes on the low table by the window, she felt Ji-hun watching her every movement. "Tell me about Lagos," he said, as they sat across from each other. "What was it like teaching there?" "Chaotic, beautiful, frustrating." She picked at her rice, uncomfortable with his attention. "I taught English and literature to teenagers who had bigger dreams than their circumstances allowed." "Like you." "I achieved my dream. I became a teacher. The circumstances just changed. And now? Now I survive. I adapt. I do what I must for my family." Ji-hun leaned back, studying her with those sharp eyes. "Survival is something I understand. But what happens after survival? What do you want when the immediate danger passes?" "I want my mother healthy, my siblings educated, a future for them that doesn't depend on luck or charity." "And for yourself?" The question caught her off guard. When had she last thought about her own wants beyond the immediate needs pressing down on her? "I want to matter, to build something meaningful." "You already matter." "As a domestic worker? As someone grateful for scraps from your table? As someone who changed the temperature of this entire house in 2 days?" His voice carried conviction that made her stomach flutter. "As someone brave enough to stand up to Yuna Park. As someone who makes me remember what it feels like to have a real conversation." "Mr. Kwan, Ji-hun, this isn't appropriate." "Nothing about my life is appropriate. I kill people, Petra. I run drugs and weapons through this city. I collect debts with violence and fear. But when you look at me, I remember the man I wanted to be before this world claimed me." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Petra set down her chopsticks, her hands shaking slightly. "I can't be responsible for your conscience." "You're not responsible for anything except doing your job. I'm just telling you why I chose you. Because you're engaged to someone else. Because I'm trapped in arrangements made by other people for their benefit. There's a difference." Before Petra could respond, the study door opened without ceremony. Una swept in wearing a cream silk dress that probably cost more than Petra's yearly salary. Her beauty was sharp today, all cutting edges and dangerous angles. "Darling, we need to discuss the wedding menu." Her smile was perfectly crafted as her gaze swept over the breakfast table. "Oh, how sweet. You're eating with the help now." Ji-hoon's expression went carefully blank. "Petra is my new personal attendant. We were discussing her duties." "Personal attendant?" Yuna's laugh had all the warmth of winter wind. "How wonderfully progressive of you. Does this position include sharing meals? I wasn't aware our staff had such privileges." "She's here on my invitation." "Of course she is." Yuna moved closer to the table, her perfume heavy and cloying. "Tell me, Petra, do you find Korean cuisine to your taste? I know African palates can be quite different." The insult was wrapped in silk, but its edges cut deep. Petra stood, recognizing the power play. "The food is delicious, Miss Park. Thank you for your concern." "Oh, I'm very concerned. About many things." Yuna's eyes glittered with malice. About proper boundaries. About people understanding their place. About loyalty. "Yuna," Ji-hoon's voice carried warning. "What? I'm simply getting to know our new staff member. After all, if she's going to be so close to you, we should all be comfortable with her presence." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Petra felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders, but she kept her spine straight. "I should return to my duties." "Yes, you should." Yuna's smile never wavered. "I'm sure you have many things to learn about serving in a proper Korean household." As Petra reached the door, she heard Yuna's voice drop to a whisper that somehow carried clearly across the room. "Really, darling? A Nigerian maid as your personal attendant? What will people think?" "They'll think I choose my own staff." Ji-hoon's response was equally quiet, but carried enough ice to freeze flame. Petra closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her heart pounding. The conversation continued inside, their voices rising and falling like storm waves, but the words were lost behind the heavy wood. Sujin appeared at her elbow, as if summoned by instinct. "How bad?" "Bad." Petra pushed away from the door and started walking. "She knows." "Knows what?" "That there's something between us. Something dangerous." They walked in silence until they reached the servants' stairwell, away from the main corridors where voices carried. Only then did Sujin speak. "She's not just jealous, Petra. She's scared. Yuna's power comes from being Ji-hoon's wife. If he changes his mind about the marriage. He won't. He can't. This is bigger than personal feelings. Maybe, but she doesn't know that. And scared people do terrible things." The days that followed proved Sujin's words prophetic. Petra's new duties kept her in Ji-hoon's orbit, from dawn until late evening. She managed his calls, served his meals, organized his meetings with men whose names she learned not to remember. The work itself wasn't difficult, but the constant proximity to Ji-hoon created an electricity that made every interaction charged with possibility. Yuna's response was swift and calculated. She began appearing wherever Petra worked, always with some urgent need for Ji-hoon's attention. She criticized Petra's efficiency loudly enough for other staff to hear. She rearranged schedules to create conflicts that made Petra appear incompetent. Most dangerously, she began dropping comments about Petra's family. Casual mentions of how difficult it must be for Africans to adjust to Korean culture. Observations about the challenges faced by families dependent on foreign employment. Suggestions that instability could strike anyone at any time. "She's playing with you," Mrs. Cho warned one afternoon as Petra reorganized Ji-hun's files for the third time that week. "Like a cat with a mouse. I can handle it. Can you handle what comes next? Because this is just the beginning." Yuna doesn't lose gracefully. The explosion came during a formal dinner 2 weeks later. The dining room blazed with crystal and silver, hosting an important meeting between Ji-hun and representatives from 3 other families. Petra moved invisibly around the table, refilling wine glasses and removing plates with practiced efficiency. Yuna sat at Ji-hun's right side, playing the perfect hostess with conversations that flowed like honey over razor wire. She waited until the most crucial moment of negotiation, when alliances worth millions hung in the balance, to make her move. As Petra reached across the table to refill a guest's glass, Yuna shifted suddenly, bumping her elbow with calculated precision. The wine bottle tilted, sending red liquid cascading across the white tablecloth and directly onto Ji-hun's shirt. The silence that followed was deafening. "Oh my goodness!" Yuna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in perfectly performed shock. "How clumsy! I'm so sorry, darling. I was reaching for my napkin and didn't see her there." Every eye in the room focused on Petra as she stood frozen, the empty bottle still in her hand. The wine spread across Ji-hun's chest like spilled blood, soaking into his white shirt and dripping onto his lap. "I'm so sorry," Petra began, reaching for a napkin. Yuna was faster. She rose from her chair with fluid grace, her voice carrying across the room with perfect pitch. "Really, this is unacceptable. A proper server would never be so careless." Her hand cracked across Petra's cheek with enough force to snap her head sideways. The sound echoed through the dining room like a gunshot. "Yuna." Ji-hun's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm sorry, darling, but someone must maintain standards. We can't have—" "Sit down." The 2 words carried enough menace to stop conversation at neighboring tables. Yuna's perfect composure cracked for just an instant before she recovered her smile. "Of course, darling. I was just— Sit down. Now." Ji-hun stood slowly, wine still dripping from his shirt, his eyes never leaving Yuna's face. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Petra, please ask Mrs. Cho to bring a fresh shirt to my study." Petra's cheek burned where Yuna had struck her, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, sir." As she moved toward the door, Ji-hun's voice followed her, pitched low enough that only the closest guests could hear. "And Yuna, if you ever strike one of my staff again, we'll have a very different conversation." The threat hung in the air like smoke as Petra escaped into the corridor. Her hands shook as she delivered the message to Mrs. Cho, who took one look at her reddened cheek and cursed in Korean. "This has gone too far." "It's my fault. I should have been more careful." "Your fault?" Mrs. Cho's eyes blazed. "Child, I've worked in this house for 15 years. I know intentional when I see it, but it was Sujin who provided the most valuable perspective." She found Petra in the servant's bathroom, pressing a cold cloth to her burning cheek. "I saw everything," she whispered, checking the door was closed. "She planned it. She's been watching you serve, learning your patterns. She knew exactly when to move." "It doesn't matter now." "It does matter. Because I recorded it. Petra stared at her. What? Sujane pulled out her phone, finger hovering over the screen. I've been recording her threats for weeks. The slap was just the final piece. She showed Petra the screen, displaying a video file dated that morning. This is her cornering you in the storage room yesterday. The video played Yuna's voice with crystal clarity. You think you're clever, don't you? Making him notice you. But you're nothing. A servant girl from a poor country with a sick mother. One word from me, and you'll be on a plane back to Lagos, watching your mother die because you couldn't keep your place. Sujane, you can't? I already sent it to myself in 3 different places. Insurance, in case something happens to my phone. Sujane's young face was set with determination. She threatened your family, Petra. That crosses every line. The sound of footsteps in the corridor sent them both into motion, cleaning up evidence of their conversation. But as Petra returned to her duties, she carried with her a small flame of hope. Yuna had finally revealed her true nature. And now there was proof. The next morning brought an unusual tension to the estate. Petra noticed it first, in Mrs. Cho's clipped instructions, then in the way Sujane avoided eye contact during breakfast preparations. Even the guards seemed more alert, their casual conversations replaced by watchful silence. Mr. Kwan wants to see you in his study, Mrs. Cho announced, her voice carefully neutral. Immediately. Petra's heart hammered against her ribs as she climbed the familiar stairs. The recording. Sujane must have found a way to deliver it. Her palms were damp as she knocked on the heavy oak door. Enter. Ji-hun stood with his back to her, staring out the tall windows that overlooked the courtyard. His shoulders were rigid beneath his perfectly tailored black shirt, and something in his stillness made the air feel electric with danger. Close the door, he said without turning around. She obeyed, the soft click seeming unnaturally loud in the silence. On his desk, she could see her phone lying open. The audio file paused on the screen. How long? His voice was quiet, controlled in a way that made her skin prickle. How long has she been threatening you? Mr. Kwan, How long, Petra? He turned then, and she saw something in his dark eyes that she had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder, more calculating. The look of a man who had built an empire on the bones of his enemies. Since the engagement party, she whispered, but it doesn't matter. I never intended to cause problems between you and Miss Park. A laugh escaped him, sharp and bitter. Problems between us? He moved toward his desk, pressing play on the audio file. Yuna's voice filled the room, venomous and clear. Your sick mother will die slowly and painfully in some Lagos slum. Your little brothers and sisters will starve in the streets. And it will be your fault, you pathetic African dog. Ji-hun's jaw tightened with each word. When the recording ended, the silence stretched between them like a wire about to snap. She threatened your family, he said, his voice deadly quiet. She used words that no human being should ever speak to another. Petra watched him pace behind his desk, saw the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. This was Ji-hun Kwan in his element, she realized. Not the man who had paid for her mother's medical bills or caught her when she stumbled, but the mafia boss who commanded fear across Seoul. The engagement is over, he announced, reaching for his phone. Minho will deliver the message to her father within the hour. Wait! The word escaped before she could stop it. You can't break your engagement because of me. The consequences. The consequences? He looked at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. Petra, She threatened to kill your family because you bring me breakfast. What consequences could be worse than allowing that creature to remain in my life?" He was already dialing, but she crossed the room quickly, placing her hand over his phone. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Your business partners, your alliances, everything you've built can be rebuilt." His free hand came up to cover hers, warm and steady. "Some things matter more than business, Petra." The weight of those words settled between them. She stared up at him, seeing something raw and honest in his expression that made her breath catch. "I'm arranging protection for your family," he continued, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "They'll be safer here, in Seoul. I'll have them brought over within the week." "You can't." "I can, and I will." His voice brooked no argument. "No one threatens the people I care about." The words hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither of them could take back. Petra felt her resolve crumbling, the careful walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "Ji-hun," she whispered, using his name for the first time. "We can't. This is impossible." "Why?" He stepped closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Because I'm Korean and you're Nigerian? Because I'm wealthy and you work for me? Because people will disapprove? Because you live in a world where people solve problems with violence? Because loving you could get me killed?" The words came out broken, honest. "Because I'm terrified of wanting something I can never really have." "You have me already," he said simply. "You've had me since the moment you stumbled in this room and looked at me like I was just a man instead of a monster." His thumb brushed across her cheek, and she realized she was crying. When had she started crying? "I broke off my engagement to a woman I never loved because she dared to threaten someone who means everything to me," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "If that doesn't prove how I feel about you, then I don't know what will." The distance between them disappeared. She wasn't sure who moved first, but suddenly his lips were on hers, soft and desperate and full of months of suppressed longing. She tasted coffee and something uniquely him, felt the slight roughness of his jaw against her skin. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This would change everything. She kissed him back, anyway. His arms came around her, pulling her against him as if he could make her disappear into his bones. She could feel his heart pounding against her chest, could smell his cologne mixed with something warmer, more intimate. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love your courage, your kindness, the way you stand up for people who can't defend themselves. I love that you see good in everyone, even in someone like me." Ji-hun. The study door exploded open with such force that it crashed against the wall. Armed men in black tactical gear poured through the entrance, automatic weapons trained on both of them. Behind them walked Chairman Park, his expensive suit immaculate, his smile cold and triumphant. "How touching," Park said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. "The mighty Ji-hun Kwan, brought low by his weakness for foreign trash." Ji-hun moved instantly, putting himself between Petra and the guns, but Park's men were already positioned around the room. There was no escape. "You always were too emotional, cousin," Park continued, adjusting his gold cufflinks with deliberate casualness. "Father warned me that sentimentality would be your downfall. He was right. If you've hurt anyone in this house—" Ji-hun's voice was deadly calm, but Petra could see the tension in every line of his body. Your precious staff is unharmed. For now. Park's smile widened. Though I can't make the same guarantee about your little pet here. One of his men shifted his weapon toward Petra, and Ji-hun's hands clenched into fists. This is between us, Park. Leave her out of it. Leave her out of it! Park laughed, the sound echoing off the study walls. She's the reason we're here, you fool. Yuna called me in tears, begging for help. Apparently, you've lost your mind over some African maid. The pieces clicked into place in Petra's mind with horrifying clarity. Yuna hadn't just been making threats. She had been planning this all along. Yuna set this up, she breathed. My brilliant cousin-in-law, Park confirmed with mock admiration. She realized that your infatuation made you vulnerable, weak, unfit to lead. His expression hardened. The council agrees. The council doesn't know about this, Ji-hun said with deadly certainty. This is your play, Park. Your grab for power. The council will ratify my leadership once they see what you've become. Park gestured toward Petra with disgust. A crime boss who breaks sacred engagements for a servant? Who puts sentiment above strategy? You're not the man your father was. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. When Ji-hun spoke again, his voice carried the promise of violence. You're right about one thing, cousin. I'm not my father. He shifted slightly, and Petra caught the subtle movement of his hand toward the drawer where she knew he kept a gun. I'm much worse. The study door burst open with such force that the ancient wood splintered against the wall. 8 armed men flooded into the room, their black tactical gear and assault rifles turning the elegant space into a war zone. Chairman Park smiled coldly as his mercenaries took position, weapons trained on Ji-hun. Did you really think I would come alone to kill a mad dog? Park's laugh echoed off the mahogany walls. Your own security let us through. Amazing what money can buy these days. Ji-hun's hand froze halfway to the drawer. The nearest gunman stepped closer, barrel pointed at his chest. Petra's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the bookshelf, trying to become invisible among the leather-bound volumes. Step away from the desk, cousin. Park's voice dripped with satisfaction. Slowly. But Ji-hun didn't move. Instead, he smiled. A predator's grin that made Petra's blood run cold. You always were impatient, Park. Father warned me about that weakness. I'm not here to chat about family history. Park nodded to his men. Take him. The first gunman moved forward. Ji-hun's hand shot out like lightning, grabbing the bronze letter opener from his desk. In one fluid motion, he drove it deep into the man's throat. Blood sprayed across the Persian rug as the mercenary dropped, gasping and choking. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded through the room as Ji-hun dove behind his massive desk. Bullets shattered picture frames and tore chunks from the wooden walls. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood. Kill him! Park screamed over the noise. Kill them both! Petra crouched behind the bookshelf, her whole body shaking as bullets whined past her head. Books exploded into paper fragments around her. Through the smoke and destruction, she saw Ji-hun crouched behind his desk, blood streaming from a graze on his temple. He caught her eye across the chaos. Even in this hell, his first concern was for her safety. He mouthed one word. Run. But there was nowhere to go. Park's men had blocked the only exit. They were trapped like animals in a cage, waiting for the hunters to close in. Flush him out, Park ordered. 2 men began circling the desk from opposite sides, while the others maintained cover fire. Ji-hun was cornered, outnumbered, with nothing but a pistol against military-grade weapons. That's when Petra saw it. The heavy crystal paperweight on the shelf beside her. A wedding gift from some forgotten business partner. Without thinking, she grabbed it and hurled it with all her strength at the nearest gunman. The crystal struck him in the temple with a sickening crack. He stumbled backward, his rifle spraying bullets into the ceiling as he fell. In that moment of confusion, Ji-hun rolled out from behind the desk, his pistol barking twice in rapid succession. 2 more men dropped. "You little bitch!" Park spun toward Petra, his own gun rising. But Ji-hun was already moving, tackling his cousin to the ground. They rolled across the blood-slicked floor, fighting for control of the weapon. The remaining mercenaries hesitated, unable to get a clear shot without risking their employer. That hesitation cost them everything. The study windows exploded inward as Ji-hun's elite security team rappelled through the glass. Minho led the assault, his team moving with surgical precision. The gunfight that followed was brutal and one-sided. Park's hired muscle, caught between Ji-hun's men coming through the windows and their target behind the desk, found themselves in a crossfire they couldn't escape. Bodies hit the floor in rapid succession. The antique furniture became cover for desperate men making their last stand. A gunman tried to use Petra as a human shield, but Minho put 2 bullets in his chest before he could reach her. The man collapsed at her feet, his eyes going blank as blood pooled around his head. Petra stared at the corpse, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This was death. Real. Final. Irreversible. Not the clean endings of movies or books, but something raw and terrible that smelled of copper and fear. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Ji-hun's voice. "Park, it's over." Her employer stood over his cousin, both men breathing hard. Park's gun lay several feet away, kicked out of reach during their struggle. Blood ran from a split lip, and his expensive suit was torn and stained. "You think this ends here?" Park gasped. "You think killing me solves anything? The council will never accept a boss who chooses servants over allies. You've signed your own death warrant." Ji-hun's response was calm, almost conversational. "The council follows strength, cousin. Nothing else." He glanced around the destroyed study, counting the bodies of Park's men. "Tell me, where's your strength now?" Minho appeared at Ji-hun's shoulder, cable still attached to his tactical harness. "The estate is secure, sir. We lost 2 men in the entry, but all hostiles are neutralized except—" He looked down at Park with disgust. "Except the architect of this betrayal." Ji-hun's voice carried no emotion, but Petra could see the fury burning in his dark eyes. "Take him to the basement. I'll deal with him personally." "No." The word escaped Petra's lips before she could stop it. Both men turned to look at her, and she realized she was still pressed against the bookshelf, surrounded by the debris of Park's failed coup. Ji-hun's expression softened immediately. "Petra, you don't have to. I know what you're going to do to him." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I've seen enough death tonight." Park laughed bitterly from the floor. "Listen to her, cousin. Your little saint wants to save my soul. How touching." The crack of Ji-hun's backhand across Park's face echoed through the room. "You will not speak to her." Petra stepped carefully around the bodies, her bare feet avoiding the spreading pools of blood. When she reached Ji-hun's side, she placed a gentle hand on his arm. The muscle was rigid with controlled violence. "He's finished," she said quietly. "His men are dead. His plan failed. Killing him won't bring back your security guards or erase what happened here tonight." "He threatened you." Ji-hun's voice was barely human. "He was willing to murder you to get to me." That demands blood. And you've already spilled plenty. Petra gestured to the carnage around them. Look what we've become, Ji-hun. Look what this world does to people. For a long moment, the only sound was Park's labored breathing. Ji-hun stared down at his defeated cousin, war playing out behind his eyes. Finally he spoke. You're right. Death would be too quick. He turned to Minho. Contact our partners in the shipping district. Chairman Park is about to begin a new career in manual labor. 24-hour shifts. Indefinite contract. Park's face went white. In their world, forced labor was worse than execution. A slow death of grinding poverty and backbreaking work, invisible and forgotten. You can't, Park began. I can do anything I want, Ji-hun cut him off. I'm the one still standing. As Minho's men dragged Park away, Petra finally allowed herself to breathe. The immediate danger was over, but the aftermath felt almost as overwhelming. The study that had been her sanctuary just hours ago was now a tomb, its elegant beauty destroyed by violence and death. Ji-hun moved to her side, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm fine. The words felt strange in her mouth. Nothing about this was fine. Nothing would ever be the same. You saved my life tonight, he said softly. That throw, that moment of distraction, if you hadn't acted when you did. I couldn't watch you die. The admission hung between them like a bridge across an impossible divide. Despite everything, despite this world you live in, I couldn't let them take you. Ji-hun cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away tears she didn't realize she was crying. This is who I am, Petra. This violence, this darkness, it's not going away because we want it to. Are you sure you can live with that? Petra looked around the destroyed study, at the bloodstains that would never fully wash out, at the splintered door that would need rebuilding. She thought about her mother's medical bills, her siblings' school fees, the safety that Ji-hun's protection provided. But more than that, she thought about the man behind the monster, the one who read poetry in 3 languages, who worried about her happiness, who had just fought 8 armed men to keep her safe. I'm sure, she whispered. But Ji-hun? Yes? Promise me something. Her voice grew stronger. Promise me this isn't all we'll ever be. That someday, somehow, we'll find a way to build something better than this. He pulled her against his chest, holding her tight as sirens began to wail in the distance. I promise, he murmured into her hair. For you, Petra, I'll try to become someone worthy of that hope. The sirens grew louder, but before they could reach the mansion gates, a slow clap echoed through the shattered study. Ji-hun spun around, pulling Petra behind him as a figure emerged from the shadows near the destroyed bookshelf. Yuna stepped into the light, her once perfect appearance now disheveled and wild. Her designer dress was torn, her carefully styled hair hung loose around her shoulders, and in her trembling hands she held a silver pistol pointed directly at Ji-hun's chest. How touching, she said, her voice cracking with barely contained hysteria. The mighty Ji-hun Kwan, brought to his knees by a Nigerian maid. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara streaking down her cheeks like black tears. Ji-hun's body tensed, every muscle coiled for action. Yuna, put the gun down. Put it down? She laughed, the sound sharp and broken. After everything I've lost because of her? My engagement? My family's alliance? My future? The gun shook in her grip. Do you know what my father said when he heard about tonight? That I was weak, that I couldn't even keep my own fiancé interested. Petra felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she refused to cower. Yuna, please, this won't solve anything. Shut up! Yuna's voice rose to a shriek. You don't get to speak. You ruined everything. Her finger tightened on the trigger. I was supposed to be his wife. I was supposed to rule beside him. And then you came along with your innocent eyes and your pathetic sob story. Ji-hun took a careful step forward. This is between us, Yuna. Leave Petra out of it. Between us? Yuna's laugh was bitter. There is no us anymore, is there? You made that clear when you chose her over me, when you humiliated me in front of everyone. You humiliated yourself, Ji-hun said quietly, with your cruelty, your threats, the way you treated people you saw as beneath you. They were beneath me, Yuna screamed. I am Park Yuna. I come from one of the most powerful families in Seoul, and she's nothing but a servant girl from Africa who doesn't even understand our world. Petra stepped out from behind Ji-hun, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. You're right, she said calmly. I don't understand a world where love means possession, where power means hurting innocent people, where family means using each other as weapons. Yuna's eyes blazed with fury. You think you're so much better than me? No, Petra said softly. I think I'm different from you, and that's what scares you most. The gun wavered as Yuna's composure cracked further. He'll never truly love you. Don't you see that? You're just a novelty, something exotic and different. When the excitement wears off, he'll come back to someone who understands his world. If that's true, Petra said, then it's his choice to make, not yours. Ji-hun's voice cut through the tension like a blade. It will never be you, Yuna. Not because of Petra, not because of anyone else, because of who you've chosen to be. Yuna's face contorted with rage and pain. I loved you. No, Ji-hun said firmly. You loved what I represented. Power, status, control. That's not love, Yuna. That's ownership. The gun shook violently in Yuna's hands now. I could kill her right now. Take away the one thing that's made you forget who you really are. And then what? Ji-hun's voice was deadly calm. You think that would bring me back to you? You think I could ever forgive you for that? Tears streamed down Yuna's face. I just wanted to matter to you. You did matter, Ji-hun said, and for the first time, there was genuine sadness in his voice. You could have mattered in a good way, but you chose hate over understanding, violence over patience. The sound of boots pounding up the stairs filled the air. Minho's voice called out, Boss! Yuna's eyes darted toward the door, then back to Ji-hun and Petra. This is your last chance, she whispered. Choose me, and I'll put the gun down. Choose her, and I'll make sure neither of you ever have a moment's peace. Ji-hun moved slowly, deliberately placing himself completely between Yuna and Petra. I choose love over fear. Every time. Every day. For the rest of my life. Yuna's face crumpled, the gun dropping slightly. Then you've chosen your death. But instead of firing at Ji-hun, she turned the gun toward Petra. In that split second, Ji-hun lunged forward, his hand closing over the barrel just as the shot rang out. The bullet went wide, shattering what remained of the window behind them. Minho and two guards burst through the door, weapons drawn. Yuna collapsed to her knees, the gun clattering across the floor as sobs racked her body. It's over, Ji-hun said quietly, his hand bleeding from where he'd grabbed the hot barrel. Yuna, it's over. She looked up at him through her tears, mascara painting dark tracks down her face. What happens to me now? My family will disown me. The council will want blood for my part in this coup. Ji-hun studied her for a long moment. You have a choice. Exile or justice. Leave Korea tonight, never return, and live quietly somewhere far from here. Or face the council and accept whatever punishment they decide. Exile, Yuna whispered without hesitation. I choose exile. Paris, Ji-hun said to Minho. Make the arrangements. Private jet, tonight. Transfer enough money to last her a few years if she's careful. After that, she's on her own. Yuna struggled to her feet, her legs unsteady. She looked at Petra one last time, her expression a mixture of hatred and something that might have been regret. I hope he breaks your heart the way he's broken mine. Petra met her gaze steadily. I hope you find peace, Yuna. Real peace. As the guards escorted Yuna from the room, Ji-hun turned his attention to the aftermath. Chairman Park? Disappeared, Minho reported grimly. But not far. We'll find him. When you do, he goes to the labor camps. Permanently. No trial, no appeals. And his family loses everything. The council needs to understand that conspiracy against leadership has consequences. Over the following weeks, the Park family's empire crumbled. Their businesses were absorbed, their assets frozen, their influence erased. Word spread quickly through Seoul's underworld that attacking the Kwan family brought swift and total destruction. But Ji-hun was already thinking beyond revenge. In his private study, now rebuilt and secured, he sat across from Petra as she helped him plan changes to his organization. These protection contracts, she said, pointing to a list of businesses. Are they really protection? Or are you just collecting money for not hurting people? Ji-hun's jaw tightened. Some of both. That has to change. I know. He leaned back in his chair. It won't be overnight. Too much change too fast will create chaos, give our enemies opportunities. But gradually, yes, we move away from fear-based revenue toward legitimate protection services. Real security for businesses that actually need it. Petra nodded, making notes. And the gambling operations? Those stay, but we clean them up. No loan sharking, no violence, just honest games in safe environments. It was slow work, transforming a criminal empire into something resembling a legitimate enterprise. But with Petra's moral compass guiding him and his own growing desire to be worthy of her faith, Ji-hun found himself making choices he never thought possible. The changes rippled through their world like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that would reshape everything they'd built together. 3 months later, the morning sun cast golden light across the estate gardens, where Korean pine trees stood alongside newly planted African mahogany saplings. Petra walked the stone paths, admiring how the two worlds had grown together, roots intertwining beneath the surface. Petra! Her youngest brother Samuel came running across the lawn, his school uniform slightly wrinkled from play. At 14, he had adapted to Seoul life with the resilience of youth, switching between English, Korean, and Igbo with ease. Mom wants to see you in the kitchen. She found her mother, Mrs. Akono, teaching Sujena how to prepare jollof rice, while Mrs. Cho observed with amused curiosity. The cancer had retreated, leaving her mother thinner but stronger, her eyes bright with purpose again. The spices must bloom in the oil first, Mrs. Akono explained, stirring the aromatic mixture. Then the rice drinks the flavors slowly. Sujane nodded eagerly, taking notes in her careful handwriting. The young Korean woman had become more than a friend to Petra's family. She was their bridge to understanding Korean customs while they shared their own. How was the doctor's appointment? Petra asked, wrapping her arms around her mother's shoulders. Clean scans again, Mrs. Akono replied, leaning into her daughter's embrace. Dr. Kim says I am what they call a success story. The kitchen filled with the sounds of preparation as other staff members moved between Korean and Nigerian cooking stations. Mrs. Cho had initially resisted the cultural mixing, but watching the household transform into something vibrant and alive had won her over completely. "Where is your young man?" Mrs. Akino asked with a knowing smile. "He's been nervous as a cat all morning." Before Petra could answer, Ji-hun appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple black shirt instead of his usual formal attire. His hair was slightly disheveled, and she noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Mrs. Akono, may I borrow your daughter for a walk?" "Of course, son." Mrs. Akono had taken to calling him that weeks ago, much to his initial surprise and eventual deep pleasure. "But bring her back for dinner. We're celebrating Samuel's test scores." Ji-hun offered his arm to Petra, and they stepped out into the garden together. The late afternoon air carried the scent of jasmine and the distant sounds of Seoul traffic beyond the estate walls. "You seem different today," Petra observed, studying his profile. "Distracted." "I've been thinking about our future," he replied, leading her toward the traditional Korean pavilion he'd had restored at the garden center. "About the changes we've made, the ones still to come." The pavilion was surrounded by both cultures now. Korean lanterns hung alongside Nigerian kente cloth banners, creating patterns of light and color that shifted with the breeze. As they climbed the wooden steps, Petra noticed something unusual. Her entire family was gathered there, along with Mrs. Cho, Soo-jin, and Minho. Even her sister Grace, who had arrived from Lagos the week before to start university in Seoul, sat beside Samuel with a camera in her hands. "What is this?" Petra laughed, but Ji-hun had already dropped to one knee before her. He pulled out a small velvet box, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Inside lay a ruby ring, the deep red stone surrounded by small diamonds that caught the light like stars. "Petra Akungwo," he said, his voice carrying across the pavilion with quiet strength. 3 months ago, you saw me at my worst and chose to stay. You've watched me try to become worthy of your faith, and somehow you've loved me through every failure and small victory." Mrs. Akino dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, while Samuel grinned broadly. "You've brought light into a house that knew only shadows." Ji-hun continued, "You've given me a family I never knew I wanted, a purpose beyond mere survival. Will you marry me? Will you help me build something beautiful from what we have now?" Petra looked down at him, this dangerous man who had learned to be gentle, this criminal who had chosen to become something better. Around them, both their families waited with held breath. "Yes?" she whispered, then louder. "Yes, always yes." The pavilion erupted in cheers as Ji-hun slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her. Mrs. Akino began singing a traditional Nigerian blessing, while Mrs. Cho produced a bottle of expensive champagne as if from thin air. As the celebration continued around them, Petra and Ji-hun found themselves standing at the pavilion's edge, looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. The city spread below them like a sea of possibilities. "I want our wedding to honor both worlds," Petra said, her hand finding his. "Korean hanbok and Nigerian gil, both ceremonies, both families truly joined." "Whatever you want," Ji-hun replied, then paused. "Though I should warn you, Minho's already planning the security details. Apparently, a wedding between a reformed crime boss and a Nigerian princess requires serious precautions." Petra laughed. "Princess? Who told him that?" "Your mother. She's been telling everyone you're descended from Igbo royalty. We'll have to invite half of Lagos and all of Seoul. Petra mused. Think your reformed organization can handle that kind of party? Ji-hoon's expression grew thoughtful. Speaking of the organization, I've been thinking about what comes next. The legitimate businesses are growing, but there are still challenges. Still people who think reform makes us weak. And what do you think? I think, he said slowly, that building something lasting is harder than destroying what exists. But I also think we're strong enough for whatever comes. In the pavilion behind them, Samuel was teaching Minho a Nigerian song while Grace documented everything with her camera. Mrs. Cho and Mrs. Akono compared wedding planning notes despite the language barrier, using hand gestures and Sujane's translation to communicate their growing excitement. "Look at them," Petra said softly. 6 months ago, none of us could have imagined this. 6 months ago, I thought love was weakness, Ji-hoon admitted. Now, I know it's the only thing strong enough to change everything. As the soul lights began to twinkle in the growing dusk, they stood together at the threshold of their new beginning. The road ahead would bring challenges they couldn't yet imagine, moments that would test everything they'd built. But wrapped in the warmth of chosen family and witnessed love, they felt ready to face whatever storm might come. The ruby on Petra's finger caught the last rays of sunlight, sending prisms of red light dancing across the pavilion where two worlds had become one.